The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand corridors of Buckingham Palace as Queen Camilla walked slowly toward her private chambers. Her footsteps echoed softly on the polished marble floors, a sound that had become familiar to her over the years since she had taken on her royal duties. Today felt different somehow, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Margaret, her trusted lady-in-waiting, was already waiting in the sitting room with a concerned expression on her face. She had been with the royal household for nearly 30 years and had served the late Queen Elizabeth with unwavering loyalty. Now she devoted that same dedication to Camilla, though the transition had not always been smooth. "Your Majesty," Margaret began carefully, "there's something rather unusual I need to discuss with you." The maintenance crew was working on the storage rooms in the East Wing yesterday, and they discovered something quite extraordinary. Camilla settled into her favorite armchair, the one that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth, and gestured for Margaret to continue. The room was filled with afternoon light streaming through the tall windows, illuminating the countless photographs and personal items that made this space feel like home. "They found a hidden compartment behind one of the old wardrobes," Margaret explained, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Inside were several boxes, old jewelry cases, and what appears to be personal correspondence. The strange thing is, Your Majesty, that some of these items seem to match descriptions of pieces that went missing decades ago." Camilla felt her heart skip a beat. The palace had many secrets, and over the years, various treasures and personal items had been misplaced or simply vanished without explanation. The idea that some of these might have been hidden away deliberately was both intriguing and troubling. "Missing items?" Camilla asked, leaning forward in her chair. "What sort of things are we talking about, Margaret?" Margaret pulled out a small leather notebook from her pocket and consulted it briefly. "Well, there's a sapphire brooch that matches the description of one that belonged to Queen Victoria. There are also several pieces of correspondence, some dating back to the 1950s, and what appears to be a small collection of photographs that I've never seen before." The weight of this discovery settled on Camilla's shoulders. As the current queen, she was the guardian of not just the crown and its traditions, but also of the family's history and secrets. Every item in the palace had a story, and many of those stories were deeply personal and potentially sensitive. "Have you told anyone else about this discovery?" Camilla inquired, knowing that palace staff were generally discreet, but that news of this magnitude could easily spread. "Only Thomas, the head of maintenance, knows about it, and I've asked him to keep it confidential until we can determine what exactly we're dealing with," Margaret replied. "I thought it best to inform you first before taking any further action." Camilla nodded approvingly. Margaret's discretion and loyalty were qualities she valued immensely. The palace had seen enough scandals and controversies over the years, and the last thing they needed was for sensitive family materials to become public knowledge without proper context. "I think we should examine these items together, Margaret," Camilla decided, "but we must be extremely careful about how we handle this. Some of these things might be deeply personal to family members, both living and deceased." As they made their way through the palace corridors toward the East Wing, Camilla couldn't help but think about the layers of history contained within these walls. Every room, every corridor, every hidden space held memories and secrets that spanned generations. The monarchy had survived for centuries, partly because of its ability to preserve its dignity and privacy, even in the face of public scrutiny. The storage room in question was located in a section of the palace that was rarely visited by anyone except maintenance staff. The walls were lined with old furniture, paintings that had been removed from public areas, and countless boxes containing everything from Christmas decorations to obsolete protocol manuals. Thomas, a kind man in his 60s who had worked at the palace for most of his adult life, was waiting for them with a nervous expression. He had clearly been affected by the significance of his discovery and was eager to hand over responsibility to those better equipped to handle such matters. "It's right here." "Your Majesty," Thomas said, leading them to a large mahogany wardrobe that had been moved away from the wall. Behind it, a section of the wood paneling had been removed, revealing a space that was about 3 feet wide and 2 feet deep. Camilla peered into the hidden compartment and felt a chill run down her spine. Even in the dim light, she could see that the items inside were carefully arranged and had been placed there with obvious intention. This wasn't a case of things being accidentally misplaced or forgotten. Someone had deliberately hidden these treasures. "We'll need proper lighting and some clean cloth to handle these items," Camilla instructed. "And Thomas, I want you to ensure that this area remains secured and that no one else comes near it until we've had a chance to properly catalog everything." As Margaret went to fetch the necessary supplies, Camilla remained in the storage room staring at the hidden compartment. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was concealed in this space was going to change everything. The careful way the items had been arranged suggested that someone had gone to great lengths to preserve them, but why hide them in the first place? Her mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps these were items that had been removed during wartime for safekeeping. Maybe they contained information that someone felt was too sensitive to keep in the regular archives. Or perhaps they were simply personal treasures that someone had wanted to protect from the public eye. When Margaret returned with a portable lamp and white cotton gloves, Camilla took a deep breath and prepared to uncover secrets that had been hidden for decades. Whatever they found in that hidden space, she knew that her role as queen meant she would have to handle it with wisdom, discretion, and respect for all those who had come before her. The afternoon light was beginning to fade as they prepared to begin their careful examination of the hidden treasures, unaware that what they were about to discover would reveal secrets that had been carefully guarded for more than half a century. With trembling hands, Camilla reached into the hidden compartment and carefully lifted out the first item. It was a small velvet jewelry box, deep blue in color and clearly very old. The fabric was worn but still beautiful, suggesting it had been handled with great care over many years. Margaret held the lamp closer as Camilla gently opened the box. Inside, nestled on faded white silk, was the most beautiful sapphire brooch either of them had ever seen. The central stone was the size of a robin's egg, surrounded by smaller diamonds that caught the light and sparkled even in the dim storage room. But what made Camilla gasp was not just the beauty of the piece but the small card tucked beneath the silk lining. "To my dearest Victoria, on our wedding day. May this bring you as much joy as you have brought me. Albert, 1840, Camilla read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret's eyes widened in recognition. This was not just any sapphire brooch. This was Prince Albert's wedding gift to Queen Victoria, a piece that had been missing from the royal collection for over 60 years. Official records indicated it had been lost during the chaos of World War II, when many royal treasures were moved to secret locations for safekeeping. "Your Majesty," Margaret said quietly, "this brooch was listed in Queen Victoria's personal inventory. It was supposed to be passed down to Queen Elizabeth, but it disappeared sometime in the 1940s. The insurance records show it was valued at an enormous sum even then." Camilla carefully placed the brooch back in its box and reached for the next item. This time it was a bundle of letters tied with a faded pink ribbon. The paper was yellowed with age, and the handwriting on the envelopes was elegant and clearly feminine. The return address made Camilla's heart race. Princess Margaret Rose, Royal Lodge, Windsor. These were letters from Princess Margaret, Queen Elizabeth's younger sister, who had died in 2002. But these were not official correspondence. The way they were tied with ribbon and hidden away suggested they contained something much more personal and potentially sensitive. "Should we read them, Your Majesty?" Margaret asked, sensing Camilla's hesitation. Camilla considered this carefully. As queen, she had a responsibility to protect the privacy and dignity of all family members, both living and deceased. But she also had a duty to understand what had been hidden and why. If these letters contained information that could affect the monarchy or its reputation, she needed to know. "We'll read just enough to understand their nature," Camilla decided. "If they're too personal, we'll seal them again and decide later how to handle them properly." The first letter was dated 1955, and even reading just the opening lines made it clear why these had been hidden away. Princess Margaret was writing about her feelings for Group Captain Peter Townsend, the divorced war hero whom she had been forbidden to marry because of his previous marriage. The letters revealed the depth of her pain and her struggle between duty and love. "My dearest friend," the letter began, "I cannot sleep for thinking about what might have been. The heart wants what it wants, but the crown demands sacrifice that I fear I am not strong enough to make." Camilla felt a deep sadness reading these words. She understood all too well the conflict between personal happiness and royal duty. Her own path to the throne had been complicated by questions of love and propriety, and reading Margaret's private thoughts from decades ago felt like looking into a mirror of royal women's struggles. As they continued to examine the contents of the hidden compartment, they discovered photograph albums containing pictures that had never been seen by the public. There were images of Queen Elizabeth as a young mother, playing with Charles and Anne in private moments. There were photos of Princess Margaret at parties and social gatherings, laughing and dancing with friends whose faces Camilla recognized from history books. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. At the bottom of the compartment was a large manila envelope sealed with red wax. The seal bore the royal coat of arms, but it had been broken at some point and then carefully resealed. Inside was a collection of documents that made Camilla's hands shake as she read them. These were medical records, financial documents, and what appeared to be private correspondence between Queen Elizabeth and various government officials. The dates spanned from the 1950s through the 1980s, covering some of the most challenging periods in modern royal history. One document particularly caught Camilla's attention. It was a letter from Queen Elizabeth to the Prime Minister, discussing concerns about media intrusion and the need to protect certain family information from public scrutiny. The letter was dated 1981, during the period when Diana Spencer was being courted by Prince Charles. "Margaret," Camilla said, her voice heavy with the weight of what they were discovering, "I think someone deliberately collected these items because they were considered too sensitive for the regular royal archives. But who would have had access to all of these different types of materials?" Margaret had been thinking the same thing. The collection was too diverse and too carefully curated to have been assembled by chance. Someone with significant access to royal family materials had deliberately gathered these items and hidden them away. But the question remained. Were they protecting these secrets, or were they planning to use them for some other purpose? As they continued their examination, they found more jewelry pieces that had been reported missing over the years. There was a pearl necklace that had belonged to Queen Mary, a diamond tiara that had been part of Princess Anne's wedding gifts, and several pieces of antique silverware bearing royal crests from different periods in history. Each discovery raised more questions than it answered. How had all of these valuable items ended up in the same hidden space? Who had put them there and when? Most importantly, why had they been concealed rather than returned to their rightful places in the royal collection? The afternoon had turned to evening by the time they finished cataloging the contents of the hidden compartment. The storage room felt cold and mysterious, filled with secrets that had been sleeping in darkness for decades. Camilla knew that these discoveries would require careful investigation and even more careful handling. "We need to research the history of this part of the palace," Camilla told Margaret as they prepared to secure the area. "I want to know who had access to this storage room over the years, and I want to understand how these items could have been collected without anyone noticing they were missing." As they walked back through the palace corridors, both women were lost in thought about the implications of their discovery. The hidden treasures were more than just valuable objects. They were pieces of royal history that someone had felt needed to be protected or concealed. The question now was whether that someone had been friend or foe to the royal family. The next morning brought fresh challenges as Camilla sat in her private study, surrounded by the carefully catalogued items from the hidden compartment. She had spent most of the night thinking about the implications of their discovery, and she knew that she needed expert help to understand what they had found. Sir David Richardson, the palace's chief archivist, arrived promptly at 9 o'clock. He was a distinguished man in his 70s who had dedicated his entire career to preserving royal history. His knowledge of palace records and royal collections was unmatched, and Camilla trusted his discretion completely. "Sir David," Camilla began, "what I'm about to show you must remain absolutely confidential until we can determine the best way to handle this situation. Yesterday we discovered a hidden compartment containing items that appear to have been missing from the royal collection for many years." Sir David's eyebrows rose with interest. In his decades of service, he had encountered many mysteries related to missing royal artifacts, but most had never been resolved. The idea that some of these items might have been deliberately hidden rather than lost was both exciting and concerning. As Camilla showed him each item, Sir David's expression grew more serious. He recognized many of the pieces from old inventory records and insurance claims. The sapphire brooch alone represented not just enormous monetary value, but irreplaceable historical significance as a personal gift between Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Your Majesty, Sir David said carefully. These items didn't just disappear randomly. Someone with extensive knowledge of the royal collection and significant access to palace areas assembled these things deliberately. The question is whether they were trying to protect them or steal them. Camilla had been thinking along the same lines. The careful preservation of the items suggested protection rather than theft, but the secrecy involved was deeply troubling. Who in the palace would have had both the access and the knowledge to gather such a diverse collection of sensitive materials? I need you to research the history of that storage room, Camilla requested. I want to know everyone who had regular access to that area over the past 50 years. I also want you to cross-reference the dates when these items were reported missing, with any significant events or personnel changes in the palace. Sir David nodded and made notes in his leather portfolio. I'll start with the employment records and access logs. If someone was systematically collecting these items, there should be patterns we can identify. As Sir David left to begin his research, Margaret entered with a troubled expression. She had been thinking about the Princess Margaret letters all night, and she had a theory that was both shocking and plausible. Your Majesty, Margaret said, settling into the chair across from Camilla's desk. I've been wondering about the timing of when these items were hidden. Most of them seem to have disappeared during periods of significant stress or controversy for the royal family. Camilla looked up from the Princess Margaret letters she had been reading. Margaret's observation was astute. The brooch had vanished during World War II when the royal family was under enormous pressure. The letters and documents dated from periods when the monarchy faced public criticism or family scandals. You think someone was protecting these items from being used against the family? Camilla asked. Or someone was collecting evidence that could be used against the family, Margaret replied grimly. Think about it, Your Majesty. These aren't just valuable objects. They're pieces that could tell stories the royal family might not want told publicly. The possibility that someone had been gathering potentially damaging materials was chilling. Camilla thought about all the palace staff who had served faithfully over the years, but she also knew that loyalty couldn't always be assumed. The royal family had faced betrayals from trusted insiders before. That afternoon, Camilla decided to examine the letters more thoroughly. Reading Princess Margaret's private thoughts about her forbidden love affair was painful, but it also revealed details about family dynamics that had never been made public. Margaret wrote about conversations with Queen Elizabeth, about pressure from their mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and about the impossible choice between love and duty. One letter in particular caught Camilla's attention because it mentioned a name she recognized. Princess Margaret wrote about confiding in dear Edward about her struggles with the Peter Townsend situation. Edward could only refer to Sir Edward Ford, who had been assistant private secretary to Queen Elizabeth during the 1950s. Sir Edward Ford had been a trusted member of the royal household for many years, but he had also been in a position to have access to many different types of royal documents and personal items. Could he have been the one who assembled this hidden collection? Camilla called Sir David to share this new information. Within an hour, he returned with employment records that made the picture even clearer. Sir Edward Ford had indeed worked at the palace during all the periods when the various items had gone missing. He had also been responsible for managing storage areas and archives during much of his tenure. Sir Edward died in 2006, Sir David reported, but according to his personnel file, he had access to virtually every area of the palace during his 40-year career. He was involved in several projects to catalog and preserve royal artifacts, and he would have known the historical and monetary value of all these pieces. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Sir Edward Ford had been in the perfect position to gradually collect sensitive materials over many years. But the crucial question remained. Had he been protecting these items or planning to use them for some other purpose? We need to find out more about Sir Edward's final years at the palace, Camilla decided. Did he leave any notes or instructions about these items? Was anyone else involved in maintaining that storage area? As evening approached, Camilla found herself alone in her study, surrounded by the mysterious collection that had emerged from decades of hiding. Each item told a story of royal life behind the public facade, revealing the human struggles and difficult decisions that shaped the monarchy. The sapphire brooch sparkled in the lamplight, a symbol of love and commitment between Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The letters revealed Princess Margaret's heartbreak and sacrifice. The photographs showed private moments of joy and family connection, that the public had never been allowed to see. But there were also darker implications. If these items had been collected as potential weapons against the royal family, their discovery raised serious questions about security and trust within the palace walls. How many other secrets might be hidden in forgotten corners of the vast royal residence? Camilla realized that tomorrow would bring difficult decisions. She would need to determine how to handle Princess Margaret's private letters, whether to return the missing jewelry to its proper place in the royal collection, and most importantly, whether to investigate further into Sir Edward Ford's possible motives. The weight of these secrets felt heavy on her shoulders. As queen, she was responsible for protecting both the monarchy's dignity and its history, but she was also a woman who understood the pain of having her private life scrutinized and judged by others. Looking at Princess Margaret's letters, Camilla felt a deep connection to the struggles of royal women who had come before her. They had all faced impossible choices between personal happiness and public duty. They had all made sacrifices that the public would never fully understand or appreciate. The hidden treasures were more than just artifacts. They were evidence of the human cost of wearing the crown, and Camilla knew that handling them would require not just wisdom, but compassion for all those whose secrets had been preserved in that dark compartment for so many years. 3 days later, Sir David returned with information that changed everything Camilla thought she knew about the hidden collection. He had spent hours in the palace archives and had made a discovery that was both surprising and deeply moving. "Your Majesty," Sir David began, his voice filled with emotion, "I found Sir Edward Ford's private journal in the archived personal effects of former palace staff. What I read there puts an entirely different light on our discovery." Camilla set down her teacup and gave Sir David her full attention. She had been dreading the possibility that a trusted staff member had been collecting potentially damaging materials, and she hoped that his research would provide a more innocent explanation. According to his journal entries, Sir David continued, Sir Edward was indeed responsible for hiding these items, but his motivations were entirely protective. He writes about being approached in 1953 by someone he describes as a journalist with questionable intentions, who was seeking access to royal artifacts and documents for what he called historical research. The revelation hit Camilla like a physical blow. The idea that someone outside the palace had been actively seeking materials that could be used against the royal family was terrifying. It also explained why Sir Edward had felt the need to hide these particularly sensitive items. He goes on to write, Sir David continued, reading from his notes, that he became increasingly concerned about security breaches and the possibility that certain items in the royal collection could be misused if they fell into the wrong hands. His solution was to remove the most sensitive pieces and hide them where only he could find them. Camilla felt a wave of relief mixed with gratitude for Sir Edward's foresight and loyalty. He had sacrificed his own reputation to protect the royal family, knowing that if his actions were discovered, he could be accused of theft. Instead, he had been a guardian of secrets that could have caused enormous damage if they had been exposed at the wrong time. Did he write anything about his plans for these items? Camilla asked. Why didn't he return them before he died? Sir David's expression grew sad. The final entries in his journal indicate that he was suffering from early dementia in his last years at the palace. He writes about becoming confused and worried that he might forget where he had hidden the items. He planned to create a map or written record of their location, but there's no evidence that he ever did so. The tragedy of Sir Edward's situation became clear to Camilla. A loyal servant who had risked everything to protect the royal family had been betrayed by his own failing memory. The items he had hidden so carefully had been lost to him as well, leaving him unable to complete his protective mission. There's something else, Your Majesty, Sir David added. His journal mentions that he wasn't working alone. He writes about my trusted colleague, who helped him move some of the larger items and who knew about the hiding place. But he never mentions this person by name. This new information opened up another mystery. If Sir Edward had a collaborator, that person might still be alive and could provide more details about the hidden collection. But it also raised questions about whether that person could be trusted to keep the secret. Margaret, who had been listening quietly, suddenly looked up with recognition in her eyes. Your Majesty, I wonder if that colleague might have been Mrs. Dorothy Wilkins. She was Sir Edward's assistant for many years, and she always seemed to know everything that was happening in the palace archives. Camilla remembered Mrs. Wilkins vaguely. She had been a quiet, efficient woman who had retired sometime in the 1990s. If she was still alive, she might be able to provide crucial information about Sir Edward's intentions and whether there were other hidden collections waiting to be discovered. "Do we have any current contact information for Mrs. Wilkins?" Camilla asked. "I can try to locate her through the retired staff pension records," Sir David offered. "If she's still alive, she would be in her late 80s, but she might be willing to speak with us." While Sir David went to research Mrs. Wilkins' whereabouts, Camilla decided to examine the medical documents more carefully. These papers had been troubling her because they contained information about royal family health issues that had never been made public. Some of the documents related to psychological evaluations and treatments that could have been extremely damaging if revealed during the politically sensitive periods when they were created. One file contained records related to Princess Margaret's struggles with depression and alcohol use during the 1970s and 1980s. Another included medical reports about various family members' mental health challenges during particularly stressful periods. These were exactly the type of documents that could have been weaponized by enemies of the monarchy to suggest that the royal family was unfit to rule. Reading these private medical details made Camilla feel uncomfortable, but she understood why Sir Edward had felt compelled to hide them. In an era when mental health was stigmatized and poorly understood, revelations about royal family members receiving psychological treatment could have caused a constitutional crisis. The financial documents were equally sensitive. They revealed details about royal family investments, property holdings, and personal expenses that would have been embarrassing if made public during periods when the country was experiencing economic hardship. There were also records of payments made to various individuals that could have been misinterpreted as attempts to buy silence or influence. As Camilla worked through the documents, she began to appreciate the enormous burden that Sir Edward had taken upon himself. Every item in the hidden collection represented a potential scandal or crisis that he had prevented through his careful guardianship. He had essentially appointed himself as the protector of royal family secrets, sacrificing his own peace of mind for the good of the monarchy. That evening, Sir David called with news that Mrs. Dorothy Wilkins was indeed still alive and living in a retirement home in Surrey. She had agreed to meet with them the following day, though she had seemed surprised and somewhat nervous about their request to discuss her time at the palace. "She asked specifically whether she was in any trouble," Sir David reported. "I assured her that we simply needed her help with some historical questions, but I think she suspects this is about something more significant." Camilla spent the evening preparing questions for Mrs. Wilkins, hoping that the elderly woman would be able to provide clarity about Sir Edward's actions and motivations. She was particularly interested in learning whether there might be other hidden collections and whether Sir Edward had left any instructions about when or how the items should be revealed. As she prepared for bed, Camilla reflected on how her understanding of the situation had completely changed. What had initially seemed like a potential betrayal had turned out to be an act of extraordinary loyalty and sacrifice. Sir Edward Ford had given up his own security and peace of mind to protect the royal family from threats they might never have known existed. The hidden treasures were no longer mysterious artifacts of uncertain origin. They were evidence of one man's dedication to preserving the dignity and stability of the monarchy during some of its most vulnerable moments. Each item represented a crisis averted, a scandal prevented, a family protected from those who would have used their private struggles against them. But questions remained about what to do with these revelations. Should the items be returned to their original places in the royal collection? Should Princess Margaret's letters be shared with other family members or permanently sealed? Most importantly, should the public ever learn about Sir Edward's heroic actions on behalf of the royal family? Camilla knew that these decisions would require careful consideration of both historical accuracy and family privacy. Sir Edward Ford deserved to have his loyalty recognized, but the royal family also deserved to have their private struggles remain private. Finding the right balance would be one of the most challenging decisions of her reign. The retirement home in Surrey was a pleasant brick building, surrounded by well-maintained gardens. As Camilla's car pulled up to the entrance, she felt nervous about meeting Mrs. Dorothy Wilkins. This elderly woman held the key to understanding one of the most significant discoveries in recent palace history, and Camilla hoped she would be willing to share what she knew. Mrs. Wilkins was waiting in the home's comfortable sitting room, a tiny woman with bright blue eyes and silver hair neatly arranged. Despite being 87 years old, she appeared alert and dignified. When Camilla entered the room, Mrs. Wilkins attempted to stand and curtsy, but Camilla quickly gestured for her to remain seated. "Mrs. Wilkins," Camilla said warmly, "thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. I hope you understand that this conversation is completely confidential, and you're not in any trouble whatsoever." Relief washed over Mrs. Wilkins's face, though she still appeared anxious about the purpose of their visit. She had served the royal family faithfully for over 30 years, and even in retirement, she felt a deep sense of responsibility toward the monarchy. "Your Majesty," Mrs. Wilkins began in a voice that was still strong despite her age, "when Sir David called about questions regarding my time at the palace, I wondered if this might be about Sir Edward's special project. I've kept that secret for over 20 years, but I've often wondered what became of those items." Camilla felt her heart rate increase. Mrs. Wilkins clearly knew about the hidden collection, and her use of the phrase "special project" suggested that Sir Edward's actions had been more systematic than even his journal had indicated. "We discovered the hidden compartment 3 days ago," Camilla explained. Inside were jewelry pieces, letters, documents, and photographs that had been missing from the palace for many years. "We found Sir Edward's journal, and it helped us understand that he was protecting these items rather than stealing them." Mrs. Wilkins nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "Sir Edward was the most honorable man I ever knew," she said with conviction. "He loved the royal family with all his heart, and he was terrified that certain people were trying to use sensitive materials to damage the monarchy's reputation." "Can you tell us more about these people?" Sir David asked gently. Sir Edward's journal mentioned being approached by a journalist, but he didn't provide many details. Mrs. Wilkins took a shaky breath before beginning her story. "It started in 1953, just after the coronation. Sir Edward told me that a man claiming to be a historian had been asking questions about access to royal archives. This person seemed to know far too much about internal palace procedures and the location of certain sensitive documents. The implications of this revelation were staggering. Someone had been conducting surveillance on palace operations and targeting specific materials that could be damaging to the royal family. This wasn't simply a matter of casual journalistic interest. It sounded like organized intelligence gathering. Sir Edward became suspicious when this same person appeared at several royal events, always with different credentials but asking similar questions," Mrs. Wilkins continued. "He started investigating and discovered that this man had connections to certain tabloid newspapers that were known for paying large sums for royal scandals." Camilla felt a chill run down her spine. The royal family had always been targets for sensational journalism, but the idea that someone had been systematically hunting for ammunition to use against them was deeply disturbing. "That's when Sir Edward decided to act," Mrs. Wilkins explained. "He asked me to help him identify the most sensitive items in the royal collection, things that could be misinterpreted or used to embarrass the family. We spent months carefully removing these pieces and finding secure places to hide them." "How many hiding places were there?" Camilla asked, suddenly worried that they had only discovered one of several secret collections. Mrs. Wilkins looked thoughtful. "We created 3 main hiding places. The compartment you found was the largest, but there are 2 others. Sir Edward kept a coded list of locations, but I don't know what happened to it after he became ill. The revelation that there were additional hidden collections was both exciting and overwhelming." Camilla realized that their discovery was only the beginning of a much larger investigation into Sir Edward's protective activities. "Mrs. Wilkins," Camilla said carefully, "do you remember where the other hiding places are located?" The elderly woman closed her eyes and concentrated. "One is in the basement level of the palace library, behind a section of books about royal genealogy. Sir Edward chose that location because those books were rarely accessed by anyone except serious historians. The other is in the Queen's Tower, in a space behind the old dumbwaiter that hasn't been used for decades." Sir David was taking detailed notes, and Camilla could see his excitement about the possibility of discovering additional royal treasures and documents. But she was also concerned about what other sensitive materials might be hidden and whether they contained information that was still potentially damaging. Sir Edward ever tell you what he planned to do with these items eventually? Camilla asked. Mrs. Wilkins smiled sadly. He always said that when the threats passed and the family was safe, he would return everything to its proper place. He never intended to keep anything permanently. But as the years went on, new threats appeared and he felt that the items were safer in hiding. What kind of new threats? Sir David inquired. During the 1970s and 1980s, there were several attempts by different groups to gain access to royal family medical records and financial documents, Mrs. Wilkins explained. Sir Edward intercepted at least 3 separate efforts to bribe palace staff for information about family members' private lives. The scope of Sir Edward's protective activities was far greater than Camilla had imagined. He had essentially been running a one-man security operation to safeguard royal family privacy, using his position and knowledge to stay ahead of those who would exploit sensitive information. Mrs. Wilkins, Camilla said, I want you to know how grateful the royal family is for your loyalty and Sir Edward's dedication. You both sacrificed your own peace of mind to protect us from threats we didn't even know existed. Tears rolled down Mrs. Wilkins's cheeks. Sir Edward made me promise that if anything happened to him before he could return the items, I would find a way to contact the palace and explain what had been done. But as years passed and I heard nothing about missing items being discovered, I began to think that perhaps it was better to let sleeping dogs lie. You were protecting us even in your silence, Camilla assured her. But now that we've found the first collection, we need to locate the others and decide how to handle all of this information responsibly. Mrs. Wilkins reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. I kept this all these years, hoping someday I might need it. It contains the coded references Sir Edward used for the hiding places, as well as some notes about which items were hidden where. As Camilla accepted the notebook, she felt the weight of history in her hands. This small book represented decades of secret guardianship and loyalty that had protected the royal family through some of its most challenging periods. There's one more thing, Your Majesty, Mrs. Wilkins said quietly. Sir Edward discovered that the man who had been seeking access to royal materials was not working alone. There was an organized effort to collect damaging information about the royal family, and we never found out who was behind it or whether they eventually gave up their efforts. This final revelation left Camilla with more questions than answers. If there had been an organized campaign against the royal family, were there still people out there seeking to damage the monarchy? Had Sir Edward's protective actions been enough to stop them, or had they simply found other ways to pursue their goals? As they prepared to leave the retirement home, Camilla thanked Mrs. Wilkins again for her courage in speaking with them. The elderly woman had provided crucial information that would help them understand and properly handle the hidden collections. But she had also revealed that the royal family's privacy and security challenges were far more complex and long-standing than anyone had realized. The discovery of the hidden treasures was not just about recovering lost artifacts. It was about understanding a secret war that had been fought to protect the monarchy's dignity and survival. 2 weeks after their meeting with Mrs. Wilkins, Camilla stood in her private study surrounded by the contents of all 3 hidden collections. The additional discoveries had been even more extraordinary than the first. The library hiding place had contained rare books inscribed by various royal family members, along with personal diaries dating back to Queen Mary's time. The Queen's Tower location had yielded a collection of wartime correspondence and several pieces of jewelry that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth. The Queen Mother, Sir David, had worked tirelessly to catalog and authenticate every item, and his final report painted a picture of Sir Edward Ford as one of the most dedicated royal servants in modern history. Over nearly 4 decades, he had quietly protected the monarchy from threats that could have seriously damaged its reputation and stability. Now, Camilla faced the difficult decision of what to do with this remarkable collection of royal history. Each item told a story, but many of those stories involved private struggles and family secrets that had never been intended for public consumption. As queen, she had to balance her responsibilities as guardian of royal history with her duty to protect family privacy. Margaret entered the study carrying a tea service and wearing an expression of quiet satisfaction. Over the past 2 weeks, she had helped Camilla work through the complex emotions and practical considerations involved in handling the discovered treasures. Together they had read Princess Margaret's letters, examined medical documents, and studied financial records that revealed the human side of royal life. "Your Majesty," Margaret said as she poured tea, "have you reached any decisions about how to handle these materials?" Camilla had been wrestling with this question for days. Some items clearly belonged back in the official royal collection. The sapphire brooch, the jewelry pieces, and the rare books were part of the monarchy's cultural heritage and should be preserved for future generations. But the personal letters, medical records, and private photographs presented more complicated challenges. "I've decided to return the jewelry and valuable artifacts to their proper places in the royal collection," Camilla announced. "They belong to the crown, not to any individual, and they should be preserved as part of our national heritage." Margaret nodded approvingly. This decision honored both Sir Edward's protective intentions and the historical importance of these pieces. The sapphire brooch would once again take its place among Queen Victoria's belongings, and the other jewelry would be properly catalogued and secured. "What about Princess Margaret's letters?" Margaret asked carefully. This had been the most difficult decision for Camilla. The letters revealed Princess Margaret's deepest feelings about her forbidden love affair with Peter Townsend, her struggles with royal duty, and her complex relationship with Queen Elizabeth. They provided unique insights into royal family dynamics, but they were also intensely personal and had never been intended for anyone else to read. "I'm going to seal Princess Margaret's letters and place them in the royal archives with instructions that they not be opened for 50 years, Camilla decided. "By then, everyone directly involved will have passed away, and historians will be able to study them for their educational value without causing pain to living family members." This solution respected both the historical importance of the letters and the privacy of those they discussed. Future researchers would eventually have access to these materials, but enough time would have passed to allow for objective scholarly analysis rather than sensational exploitation. "And the medical records?" Margaret inquired. "Those will be destroyed," Camilla said firmly. "They serve no historical purpose, and the privacy of royal family members, both living and deceased, must be protected. Sir Edward was right to hide them, and I'm right to ensure they never see the light of day." This decision reflected Camilla's understanding that some information was simply too personal and potentially harmful to preserve, even for historical purposes. The medical records contained details about mental health treatments and personal struggles that could still be misinterpreted or used to damage family members' reputations. As for the photographs and personal correspondence, Camilla had decided to share them with appropriate family members and allow each person to decide how their relatives' private materials should be handled. Some images might eventually be added to official royal photograph collections, while others would remain private family mementos. "There's one more decision I need to make," Camilla said, picking up a leather portfolio she had prepared. "I want to ensure that Sir Edward Ford's service and sacrifice are properly recognized." Inside the portfolio was a letter Camilla had written to be placed in Sir Edward's personnel file, officially recognizing his actions as protective rather than unauthorized. She had also prepared a private letter to be sent to his surviving family members, explaining how their relative had served the royal family with extraordinary dedication and loyalty. "Sir Edward risked his career and reputation to protect us," Camilla explained. "The least we can do is ensure that history remembers him as a hero, rather than leaving any shadow of suspicion over his actions." Margaret smiled at this decision. Sir Edward Ford had died without knowing whether his protective efforts would ever be understood or appreciated. Now, more than 15 years after his death, his loyalty was finally being recognized and honored. That afternoon, Camilla held a private ceremony in the palace chapel to honor Sir Edward's memory. She was joined by Sir David, Margaret, and several other long-serving palace staff members who had known and worked with Sir Edward during his career. Together, they said prayers of gratitude for his service and dedication. "Sir Edward Ford exemplified the very best of royal service," Camilla said during the brief ceremony. "He understood that protecting the monarchy sometimes required personal sacrifice, and he was willing to make that sacrifice without seeking recognition or reward. We are all in his debt." As the ceremony concluded, Camilla felt a sense of closure about the discovery that had dominated her thoughts for weeks. The hidden treasures had been properly sorted and handled, Sir Edward's reputation had been restored, and the royal family's privacy had been protected. But the experience had also taught her important lessons about the ongoing challenges of royal life. The threats that Sir Edward had identified in the 1950s had not disappeared. They had simply evolved. Modern technology and social media had created new ways for people to invade royal privacy and exploit sensitive information. The need for vigilance and protection was as great as ever, even if the methods had changed. Walking through the palace corridors that evening, Camilla reflected on the layers of history contained within these walls. Every room held memories, every corridor had witnessed both joy and sorrow, and every hidden corner might contain secrets that connected the present to the past. The discovery of Sir Edward's hidden collections had revealed that the UZ monarchy's survival depended not just on public support and constitutional tradition, but also on the quiet heroism of dedicated individuals who were willing to protect royal dignity from behind the scenes. People like Sir Edward Ford and Mrs. Dorothy Wilkins had served as guardians of royal privacy, asking for nothing in return except the satisfaction of knowing they had done their duty. As Camilla prepared for bed that night, she looked once more at Queen Victoria's sapphire brooch, which now sat in its proper place in her jewelry collection. The beautiful piece sparkled in the lamplight, a symbol of love, commitment, and the enduring nature of the monarchy itself. Tomorrow, the brooch would be photographed for the official royal collection catalogue, and its long journey from Queen Victoria's jewelry box to a hidden compartment and back to its rightful place would become part of the historical record. But Camilla would always remember it as a reminder of Sir Edward Ford's extraordinary loyalty and the secret guardians who had protected the royal family through some of its most challenging moments. The hidden treasures had revealed their secrets, but they had also demonstrated that the monarchy's greatest treasures were not objects at all, but the faithful service of those who dedicated their lives to preserving royal dignity and tradition for future generations.